The night air over Normandy on June 10, 1944 is thick with smoke and iron. It is 23:47 hours, and Lieutenant James Foster of the British 6th Airborne kneels in a shallow ditch, pressing his hand against the neck of a wounded private. The man's breathing is shallow, fading, and the medics are already overwhelmed. Foster's radio operator shouts into a handset, but the line is dead, cut by shrapnel somewhere in the hedgerows. For a moment, the battlefield feels like a locked vault. No messages out, no lifeline in. Then, from the corner of his vision, Foster sees movement. A shape low to the ground, fast, weaving through bursts of fire. It is not a soldier. It is a dog, harness strapped tight, stretcher dragging behind. The animal pushes forward against every instinct to run the other way, its muscles jerking like pistons under fire. Foster's reaction is not disbelief, it is relief. Against the impossible, a new form of rescue has arrived. Mud clings to paws like heavy weights, and each stride leaves an imprint in blood-soaked earth. The sound is unlike anything else on the battlefield. The heavy hiss of shells above, the thunder of machine guns, and beneath it the rhythmic panting of the dog, steady like a metronome of survival. Barking cuts through the chaos, sharp, defiant. One soldier later wrote in his diary, "The dogs moved where men hesitated. They didn't flinch the way we did. It was as if they understood the stakes." Private Harold Owen, 6th Airborne Diary, 1944. The image sears itself into memory, a living creature, trained for war, becoming the thread that ties broken human bodies back to safety. The strangeness of it is not sentimental. In mechanical terms, the dog is a courier on 4 legs, a biomachine engineered through months of conditioning. Radios at this point in the war were powerful but bulky, often weighing more than 40 pounds. Portable sets needed batteries the size of bricks, and signal lines stretched over miles of countryside that could be cut by a single artillery hit. Trucks could not always move through the ruins of villages, and runners, human messengers, were too exposed, too slow, and often killed before completing their task. Simple math. One soldier running with a message across 500 yards of fire had a survival rate estimated at less than 20% in active battles like Monte Cassino. A trained dog could cross that same distance in a third of the time, present a smaller target, and carry a message canister clipped to its collar. Every second saved could mean an artillery barrage redirected, a platoon reinforced, a wounded man pulled out alive. Numbers strip away the romance. The U.S. Army's Canine Corps alone trained over 10,000 dogs between 1942 and 1945. Britain's War Dog School at Potter's Bar produced hundreds of messenger and casualty dogs. The Red Army fielded over 40,000 canines, using them not just for messages, but for stretcher pulling, mine detection, and supply delivery. These are not anecdotes, they are logistics. A medium dog weighing 30 kilograms could pull a 2-wheeled stretcher with a wounded soldier up to 80 kilograms across firm ground. A larger shepherd could run with a 1.5 kilogram message load for up to 20 miles before exhaustion. Dogs, in raw capacity, were lighter, faster, and more reliable than many of the tools of human engineering available at the time. And yet, in the moment, it did not feel like a calculation. Soldiers who watched them described the dogs as relentless, almost mechanical in their focus. A German after-action report from 1943 complained, "Enemy uses dogs as couriers. They are difficult to shoot. They do not follow predictable paths. To the enemy, they were moving parts in a war machine. To their handlers, they were comrades. To the wounded, they were the difference between being left to bleed or being pulled back toward life." The battlefield that night in Normandy was lit by tracers and muzzle flashes. But one of the brightest images carried forward in memory was a dog, harness dragging, chest heaving, moving without hesitation through the storm. This is how the war opened another front, not between divisions of men, but between the ingenuity of logistics and the chaos of destruction. The dogs filled the gap where steel failed, where wires snapped, where human bodies could no longer endure. They were not symbols, they were not mascots. They were working gears in the massive, grinding engine of World War II.
The morning mist hangs low over Potter's Bar in Hertfordshire, England, 1942. Beyond the hedgerows sits a quiet estate that has been converted into something new. the British War Dogs Training School. Here, kennels line the fields, and drill instructors bark commands not at recruits in boots, but at animals with fur and sharp eyes. A whistle shrills, a rifle cracks blanks, and a German shepherd bolts forward, weaving past smoldering barrels of smoke. Soldiers stand with clipboards, timing the run, noting hesitation, correcting every misstep. It looks almost absurd at first glance, dogs being hardened like infantry, but in the reality, this is an industrial program. War, after all, does not wait for sentiment. It demands systems, factories, numbers. And so these fields became a production line of trained canine operators, processed with the same intensity as tanks on an assembly line. Training was not casual. Dogs destined for message duty were conditioned to ignore gunfire, to run point to point without deviation, and to return no matter the terrain. Casualty dogs were drilled to search fields for the wounded, recognizing human scent even through mud and cordite, and to tug a stretcher line back to the medics. In the Soviet Union, the Red Army ran entire battalions of dogs through obstacle courses laced with explosions and blank fire. In the United States, Fort Robinson in Nebraska became the largest training ground, housing more than 14,000 animals at its peak. The program was rigorous, ruthless in standard. Dogs that panicked under fire were dismissed. Those that performed consistently were marked for deployment. Handlers noted that the process could take 6 months with daily repetition. The result was not instinct, it was conditioning, precise as gears aligned in a machine. The gear was equally engineered. Messenger dogs carried messages inside aluminum or steel canisters attached to their collars, watertight and light enough not to hinder speed. Stretcher dogs were fitted with harness rigs, leather straps tightened across the chest, joined to 2-wheeled frames that carried collapsible litters. The design was efficient, balancing weight distribution so that a medium-sized dog could drag a wounded man across a battlefield without collapsing. Casualty dogs, searching for injured soldiers, were equipped with pouches carrying bandages, morphine syrettes, or small water canteens. Some even had lights affixed for night runs, though this was often abandoned since elimination drew sniper fire. Production kept pace with the demands of total war. British firms that once manufactured saddles shifted to making harnesses. American aluminum mills provided the canisters. Soviet workshops, stripped of luxuries, turned out crude but effective rigs from salvaged steel. Each piece was tested, adjusted, streamlined. A harness weighed no more than 2 kilograms, a stretcher no more than 12. The calculations were simple. Every kilogram mattered. A tired animal slowed like a motor under strain, burning through its reserves of energy faster than the mission required. Efficiency was survival. Then came deployment. On the Eastern Front, messenger dogs first saw action in the meat grinder of Stalingrad. Snow-clogged streets, ruins towered above frozen rivers, and men clung to shattered buildings like barnacles on stone. Communication lines were shredded daily by German artillery. Radios froze, batteries drained, runners collapsed under sniper fire. Into this void sprinted the dogs. Their speed was brutal, their courses unpredictable. They darted across alleys, climbed over rubble, vanished into smoke, only to reappear minutes later with new orders clipped to their collars. Soviet records from late 1942 note that canine messengers delivered more than 8,000 dispatches in Stalingrad alone. In the West, the first stretcher dogs went into action during the Normandy campaign. Fields were riddled with mines, hedgerows funneled troops into kill zones, and the wounded often lay exposed in open ground. Medics risked their lives crawling to them. Dogs offered another path. At dusk on June 18, 1944, a Belgian shepherd named Rick was released into a shell-blasted orchard. The dog disappeared into smoke, re-emerged with a stretcher harness trailing, and returned minutes later, pulling a corporal with both legs shattered. Witnesses described it as a sight both terrifying and miraculous. The battlefield was unforgiving. Artillery shredded earth, bullets stitched the ground, men screamed in pain. But through it all, the dogs kept moving. They were not faster than bullets, but they were faster than doubt. In those moments, they transformed training drills into survival drills, harnesses into lifelines, and every ounce of conditioning into an unbroken chain of trust. To the soldier lying in mud with lungs filling with blood, the sound of approaching paws was not animal, it was the metallic sound of gears turning in a machine designed to keep him alive.
The forest outside Smolensk, autumn 1943. The ground is damp, leaves crushed into black mud by weeks of artillery. Soviet handlers released 2 messenger dogs at once, collars fastened with dispatch tubes. The animals vanish between shattered birch trees. German scouts lying in wait are ready. By now, they know what to look for. Reports have circulated through Wehrmacht command. Beware of courier dogs. Shoot on sight. Snipers adjust their scopes not for officers, but for low, darting shapes that move faster than men. Bullets crack through branches. One dog yelps, falls, the other keeps running. The enemy has adapted. It did not take long for German forces to recognize the tactical value of their opponent's canines. They saw messages arriving faster than runners, stretcher teams retrieving wounded under fire, and they adjusted accordingly. Orders were explicit. Anti-dog measures became part of battlefield protocol. In some sectors, German machine gun nests laid suppressive fire low to the ground to cut off couriers. At night, flares were launched not just to reveal advancing infantry, but also to expose casualty dogs crawling toward fallen men. Dogs became targets like trucks or tanks, mobile assets in the machinery of war. Armies tried to shield them. Handlers camouflaged fur with mud, trained dogs to run zigzag patterns, even experimented with lightweight protective armor. Soviet units painted dark streaks across pale-coated breeds so they would not stand out in snow. British handlers worked their animals mostly at night, hoping that the chaos of darkness would cover their movements. Americans introduced decoys, sending one dog with no load to draw fire while another carried the real message. But no camouflage was perfect, no tactic foolproof. Every adaptation by one side triggered a counter by the other. The battlefield was a gear system. One wheel turning drove the next, grinding until metal screamed. The strain fell hardest on the animals. Dogs were fast, but not invulnerable. Messenger runs often stretched across miles of open terrain. A fit animal could cover 10 miles in under an hour, but under bombardment, exhaustion set in fast. Stretcher duty was worse. Dragging a wounded man across uneven ground demanded more than muscle. It demanded endurance against choking smoke, shell craters, and barbed wire. Reports from handlers speak of dogs collapsing mid-run, paws torn by rubble, fur singed by fire. He tried to move again, but his body refused. We carried the man ourselves, but the dog never got up, one Soviet medic wrote in 1943, Medical Corps Field Journal, Volume 12. There was also the limit of trust. No matter the training, war noise could break an animal's resolve. The crack of a close explosion, the whistle of incoming shells, the smell of burning fuel. Sometimes it was too much. Dogs froze, bolted, or circled back in panic. Handlers recorded that perhaps 1 in 10 broke permanently under combat conditions, never regaining steady performance. Machines can be rebuilt. Living gears can fail in ways no factory can fix. And failures came in blood. Normandy again, July 1944. A casualty dog named Trix was sent into a wheat field littered with wounded. The dog found one man, tugged his sleeve, returned for the stretcher, but halfway back a mortar landed. The explosion killed the man outright and threw the dog aside. Medics rushed, but both were gone. Records listed as mission incomplete. In Italy, messenger dogs carrying critical coordinates for artillery support were cut down by German fire. The orders lost, the battery left blind. In the Ardennes, snow muffled paws but not scent. German patrols set dogs of their own to intercept Allied canines, resulting in chaotic chases through the woods that ended with nothing delivered. Each failure left scars beyond the numbers. To soldiers who had come to rely on them, watching a dog fall was as heavy as watching a comrade die. But war allowed no pause for grief. A failed run meant no message, no rescue, sometimes no survivors. Statistics collected after the war estimate that between 15 and 20% of all canine missions in major theaters ended unsuccessfully. The margin was brutal, but even so, it was lower than the casualty rate for human messengers under fire.
The dogs failed often, but humans failed more. The machine of war ground forward, powered by flesh and steel alike. Each setback was noted, cataloged, and turned into data. And yet, in those fields and ruins, the breaking points were not abstract. They were audible, visible, final. A gunshot cutting short a sprint, a stretcher overturned in mud, a handler calling a name into the smoke, hearing no reply but the silence of spent gears.
In northern Italy, winter 1944, Allied medics huddled around a battered shepherd, its harness shredded by shrapnel. The stretcher rig lay twisted, one wheel cracked. Scrap metal was scavenged from a wrecked German motorcycle nearby. Within an hour, the wheel was repurposed, lashed to the frame with wire. The dog was patched with bandages meant for men, water poured into its mouth with trembling hands. Then the harness was buckled again, and the animal lurched back into the mud to finish the job. This was adaptation in its rawest form. Soldiers bending whatever steel, cloth, or hope they had left into tools for survival. The armies formalized such improvisations quickly. British designers modified stretcher rigs with lighter tubing, reducing weight by nearly 20%. Soviets paired dogs for heavy pulls, two animals harnessed side by side to manage larger bodies or equipment. Americans experimented with combining bicycles and canine power, building hybrid courier units that moved messages twice as fast across rural terrain. Handlers devised hand signals, whistles, even scent trails of food oil to guide dogs under blackout conditions. Every solution came not from theory, but from necessity, hammered out under gunfire. In mechanical terms, the battlefield itself became a workshop, each broken part forcing soldiers to invent replacements on the fly. By late 1944, these adaptations bore fruit in decisive moments. The siege of Leningrad, stretched over years, had starved the city and ground soldiers to exhaustion. On one night in January 1944, Soviet units held a thin corridor against relentless German artillery. Ammunition ran low, communication lines snapped again and again. 5 messenger dogs were released into the snow, each carrying coordinates and requests for supply. 3 were killed en route, 2 made it through. Minutes later, Soviet batteries adjusted fire, and German assaults stalled long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Without those deliveries, the thin line might have folded. Survival came down to the unpredictable calculus of speed, sacrifice, and chance. The climax of this forgotten story is not marked by a single battle, but by countless rescues that blurred into the grind of war. In the ruins of Cannes, a casualty dog named Bing located 3 British paratroopers buried beneath rubble, scratching at debris until medics followed. In the Italian campaign, stretcher dogs pulled dozens of men across open fields that vehicles could not cross. In France, messenger dogs carried dispatches that redirected artillery at the last moment, breaking German counterattacks. Each instance was small in scale compared to tank battles or bombing raids. Yet stacked together, these fragments of action created an unbroken chain that held units intact. To a battalion commander, a single message arriving on time could be worth more than a squad of reinforcements. To a bleeding rifleman, one stretcher dog meant the difference between fading into mud or waking up on a medic's table. The war ended as all machines eventually run down. By 1945, thousands of dogs had served, many never returning home. Records compiled after the conflict show stark numbers. More than 10,000 trained canines deployed by U.S. forces, more than 40,000 by the Soviets, hundreds by Britain and its allies. Casualty estimates are harder to confirm, but wartime veterinary corps records suggest that between 1/3 and 1/2 of deployed dogs were lost in action. Soviet Veterinary Service Archive 1947, U.S. Army Quartermaster Review 1946. The arithmetic is cold, but it frames the truth. Dogs were not a sideshow. They were statistically significant assets in the logistics of total war. For soldiers who survived, memory did not measure them in numbers. Diaries, reports, and letters carry fragments of human voices. An American sergeant wrote home in 1945, "We had a dog who never failed us. When men doubted, he ran. When lines broke, he carried hope on his back." For the men of Normandy, Stalingrad, Anzio, and countless unnamed fields, these animals were more than companions.
They were the living gears that kept the fractured engine of war turning one more day. The aftermath was quiet. Many surviving dogs were returned, some retrained for civilian service, others retired to handlers' homes. Yet the imprint they left remained in military doctrine. Manuals noted the efficiency of canine messengers, stretcher systems, and search duties. Even in the atomic age, where jets screamed overhead and rockets thundered skyward, commanders remembered that sometimes the simplest technology, a dog's stamina, nose, and loyalty, could outmatch steel.